meeting is now being recorded on our platform. You will find this meeting at the end of the week, by the end of the week, in the YouTube channel for Einstein Analytics. So in case you want to see things, you will see there. A couple of points. First one, introduce yourself. We don't have any slides today to start with. So introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, and what do you like about Einstein Analytics? Also, if you're so new that you have never heard of it but want to learn more. So we will be talking about, today we will be talking about Dataflows. So Jennifer Shier, who I think everyone knows by now, she and I will be taking you through every single possible way of doing data flows and what each of those nodes and things mean, which confuse people. We know that. We have been there and done that. So we encourage you to keep asking us questions, because the more you ask us questions, the more we will be able to explain things to you. On the other side, I am Sayantani Mitra, and I'm hosting this on behalf of Gobi Inc., where I work. And the next meetup for Chicago is in the first week of August. And the best part is that will be our 1-year anniversary. So look out for something really cool and nice coming out for the August meetup. We are not sure what we are going to do, but we are going to do something really cool.
Virtually.
So, sorry?
I said virtually. It's interesting.
Virtually. Yes, virtually. Yes. We might actually get everyone to get coffee and drinks for yourself and celebrate then. We'll see what comes up.
War stories.
Yes, war stories. That's an excellent idea. Let's do war stories. Okay, moving on. Let's finish this introduction real quick. I can see someone's, I think that's a laptop number, not someone's name, SM-T837T. No? Okay.
We might have a bot on today. It's an AI bot.
That would be new.
Okay, Karthik. You're on mute, Karthik. Or we cannot hear you. Either way.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi, my name is Anna Salinas. This is my first time actually attending any conferences that happen to be virtually. And honest, I'm just parking my car. That's what I don't want to show my video right now. I hear about you. I started looking at meetups for anything that has to do with data analytics, and I thought that you were interesting. So I wanted to know more about it. I'm very new to it. My background is actually in computer science. I mean, it's very related. A lot of the classes that I took deal with statistics. So I just wanted to know more, and here I am. I want to hear everything you have to say.
Awesome. Annie.
Anna.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, everyone. I'm Annie. As Sayantani said, I work with her at Gobi Inc. So very happy to be hosting you all today. I started training with Sayantani on Einstein Analytics about 2 or 3 months ago now. So I don't know if I qualify as a beginner still, but I still feel like one. I have a lot to learn, but I'm excited to be here. And yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining. Prabhat. Prabhat, if you can hear us, please introduce yourself. Okay. Okay, he cannot connect to the mic, which is totally fine.
I also posted the Academy, Ziad's Analytics Academy link in the chat.
Awesome. Karthik, can you give a try again? Yes, we can hear you now.
Awesome. Hey guys, Karthik Jaraman. I am a Gobi alumni. I currently work as an enterprise architect for Wolters Kluwer. It's been 2 years with Einstein Analytics and 5 years with Salesforce. one of the best places to learn your Einstein analytics or brush up on your Einstein analytics skills is the bi-monthly Einstein analytics meetup that's hosted by Sayantani, Jen, and many others. So yeah, keep them coming. Great job.
Thanks. Karthik, sorry, Catherine.
Hey, are we introducing ourselves? Sorry, I joined a few minutes late.
That's fine. Yes, we are introducing ourselves as to where we are from and what do we love about Einstein Analytics if you have been working with it, or if you are very new to it. You, of course, are not, but.
Yeah, so I'm Catherine Baker Parks. I am with Wave 6 as the analytics practice lead. Sorry, my brain's not working today because my son is homesick. I've been working with Einstein for a few years now. I love the predictive capabilities of it. My background is in SAS, so I'm still not wowed by the data prep, data transformation capabilities of Einstein, but the predictive stuff is amazing. And I love meeting and collaborating with people in this group.
Well, maybe Data Prep 3 is going to help you love it more.
I've got my fingers crossed.
Yep, we all have. Okay, the last few that I can see on the screen right now. Let's see, Krishna.
Hi, this is Krishna. I work in Chicago for a company called Transcendia. So I have about slightly close to 1 year experience in analytics on Salesforce. But I'm a one-man show, one-man band here, so trying to use these groups to learn more. I've done a lot of reports, dashboards, but have struggled to get started on AI and predictive and discovery. So hopefully I'll be there in the near future.
Awesome. Gian.
I have to unmute myself. You get this rare.
Hello.
Oh, Jen, sorry.
Is it me or Jen? Sorry.
Gian, you, not Jen.
I'm so sorry. Well,
sorry, I talk over people. It's meetings. You go for it.
So sorry. I mean, I was just trying to join here. Sorry for the delay. But I am Gia. I'm working with Salesforce for a little bit more than half a year. Very thirsty to learn. I'm following up the Chicago Data Tribe and also the amazing blog by Mitra and also Jennifer. So it's amazing to be here. And I'm trying to learn.
Welcome. Last, I think we have one left. VA.
Okay. Yeah. So hello everyone. Happy to connect with everyone here, and I can see the smile in Catherine's face because we worked together at Appeal. So right now, we have been discussing about Einstein analytics for quite some time.
That's awesome.
Yes. So working on the product for a good amount of time, and also have worked on customer implementations. And Einstein analytics definitely fascinates. At the same time, right, every product, there are certain challenges, there are certain ways we have to work around for accomplishing certain things. So that's what we have been trying all along. And so right now, I'm working as an implementation architect with Salesforce. And also, I thought it would be a good opportunity to connect with a good amount of these data tribes who have interest on Einstein analytics. Thank you.
Thank you. Jen, do you want to start?
Let's try this again. Y'all get a rare view of me at home during pandemic life, right? Like Catherine, I'm trying to parent, work from home, do all the things. For those of you who don't know me, this will be, oh my goodness. Okay, so I'm old school. This will be like my 20th year with sales. Working with it. I've been working with it since it actually came out. As a data person before that, like Catherine, SAS, data marts, all kinds of data thing. And I used to be an admin, and now I'm working as an EA architect. So my job is primarily Dataflows and any external systems like Google BigQuery, data marts, just bring it all in, figuring out how to make it work. I love it. Never been so happy. I work for Palo Alto Networks. I've almost been there 2 years. Can you believe that, Sayantani? So we're an internet security company, so I have all the data. It's fantastic. And Sayantani, one of the people who I met, if those of you on the call don't know, when I met her, I was in consulting. I saw what she was doing, and I said, hey, I want to do that too. Like, I saw her on a data flow while we're sitting at Midwest Dreaming together, and she's like, that's my job. That's what I do. So what did I do? I got this job after. I said, well, I'm going to go find a job like that as well. So just let everybody know on here, if you are working with Einstein Analytics and you can in data architecture, you'll never not work. Be a need for data architecture. So I encourage everybody here to stick with it. And hopefully what we'll show you today will kind of bring some enlightenment on parts of VA that, we struggled with this when we first learned. We struggled a lot. There was no manual. I think Carl was the only person that had any videos out back then. And then Pete and Ricky and a couple other people came out. So we're trying to kind of fill in that gap and give you guys the head start that we didn't get when we started. So happy everybody.
Yep, and to add to Jennifer's point, some of you may know that Data Prep 3.0 will be out in another 18 days or 17 days, depending on where you are in the world.
July 18th.
July 18th is, for us also, it's July 18th, so 18 days from now. And it's awesome. It's not a replacement of Dataflow yet, but it will be in spring of 20. According to Salesforce Safe Harbor, there will be no more data flows. It will be all Data Prep 3. But having said that, you still need to know what these basic terms are and what each of these nodes do, because that is not changing. It is basically the cover, the view, those kind of things are changing, and they're allowing you to do more. And instead of giving a blank slate, they're giving you something more interactive. So that is all that Data Prep 3 is. You won't have to struggle the way Jennifer and I and Catherine might have struggled with it when we started. So here we are giving you what we know after working for 3 years with this thing. Okay, Jen, you want to share your screen? Jen? Okay, there we go. And we cannot hear you if you're trying to speak.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
This is a very basic data flow. This would have confused me when I started. And we have colored nodes on here. They're not standard out of the box. We've actually added a plugin in, and I can put that link in the chat in a little bit for you if you want the colored nodes. But I just thought it'd be easier for our presentation so you can see the differences. So don't be alarmed when you go in and create a data flow and they're all purple instead. Which one, Sayantani, you can go ahead and tell me which nodes you want to start with, and I'll bring them in.
Let's start with the digest node.
Okay. Now, everybody's maybe heard me say this, and you know what? I encourage Carl to jump into what we're talking about, because you have kind of that developer perspective that the rest of us don't have. Sayantani has an amazing data science background. I'm a data person. I'm 100% self-taught. This is what I went to school for. So the first time that I was in here, I tried to use the data set builder, which is your very first button up here on the top. And I encourage people, it's good to see what it does, but it's not going to do everything that you want, and it may even confuse you. You're better off finding out what the nodes are and what they do individually first, and then maybe go back and use the data set builder. So I just want to put that out there for everybody. I'm going to move this like off the screen, and we're going to go here. For those of you who are brand new and have never seen this before, those of you who have worked with it, if you're like me or Sayantani, the first time we went in here, you see these 3 things called digest. And for a visual person like me, well, I'm sorry, 2 things called digest and 1 called an edge mart. All of these bring in data in some way or another. And when I was in here, digest meant nothing to me. It's like digest your food or Reader's Digest. So if I'm going to click on the first one, it says SFDC Digest, that probably makes the most sense, right? If I'm going to bring some data in, I'm going to bring it in from my Salesforce org. So I'm going to go ahead and create one here for you. And we're just going to call it, I probably have a digest in here already, but let's just call it extract.
While Jen does this, a few good to know and points that is going to help you in doing this better is always have some common names, like as Jen wrote, extract. I use digest, those kind of things when you're digesting a node, so that you know what you're doing. And on a later date, when you go and look at things, you don't have to figure out why that node exists. Similarly, when you are doing append, try adding the word append in front or at the end of it so that you understand that these are append nodes. Similarly, for augments or joins, you can write join or augment. When you are doing compute expressions, I like writing CE to start with, or for compute relative, CR, for filters, filter. So it's always better to do what you are and to do it in a comprehensive way so that when you go back, it's easy for you to understand. Also, if someone is taking over from you, they will understand immediately what was done and why it was done, and you don't have to go through the pain of explaining to them that, oh, this is called a digest node and this is why I digested it. It all exists. Similarly,
Yeah. Oh,
like,
we're going to have the talking over each other because both of us get very excited. So bear with us. And I just want to explain what I already made, and you can even name them. Like if you, when you're first starting out, sometimes you might be confused about what's on your left side and what's on your right side, or what's your master object or your grain, which may be a new concept for a lot of you. And so you can even name, if you want to go that extra mile, you can name that node what it is so that you won't forget later.
right, and as Jen has written, that left extract, you are joining to something. So it's always good to even have those if you want. It's not mandatory for writing in that much detail, but it is always good if you do want to write it and you want to keep it consistent. Also, the other point, and that is also, it's more of a code perspective, and I think Carl will be able to tell you more why, is naming conventions. As in, should you be always using camel case? Should you be always using sentence case? Should you be using underscores? What should you be using? Carl, do you want to tell a little more about the conventions of namings in codes?
Yeah, from the master.
Exactly.
I would say it doesn't matter the specific convention as long as you adopt something that you follow as a person or an organization and everybody agrees to that. We can argue for forever whether camel case is better or underscores, and a lot of that is preference, but just having consistency between people or teams is very helpful when you have to come in and look at somebody else's process or code. I definitely agree with the comments about the naming conventions. All my nodes start with something like digest and then the object, and then when I have a compute, it is compute and then the objects that are going together, so that it's helpful when you need to reference a node later, or you need to go back and look at something, or as I sometimes do, go into the JSON directly and edit it. You know what you're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
And when he says go into the JSON directly, this is where Carl lives here. Now, you know, I went backwards, right? I started working with Dataflows, then I went back and learned the JSON. And now this actually makes sense to me. But the first time I was in here, I was like, oh no, where's my Rosetta Stone? What does this actually mean? And it's not hard once you figure out how this works. But everybody on here who's brand new, definitely don't overwhelm yourself by trying to figure out JSON use UI when you first begin.
Well, JSON is everywhere in Einstein Analytics. Even if you're doing dashboards, the backend is JSON. Similarly, Dataflows, the backend is JSON. So you probably would want to know the few conventions that JSON has, like what the curly brackets mean, where to use commas, where to use semicolons, all those kind of things. It will be helpful.
And I still have to ask Sayantani all these years later, like, do I have the right curly brackets? Do I have the right square brackets? You know, if you're not a developer by nature, those things can be secondary, but there's always plenty of people to help, or you can ask, or you can post it in the community if you're ever wondering about syntax on here. See how account has the brackets on the outside, because it's actually referencing. It's already sort of, this UI is building the code for you, if that makes sense. And so in some places, you may see this and wonder why, or you just do what you're doing and you don't care. But it's there. And Carl, one time you explained to me the JSON itself, that's what packages up the data that you pull into your nodes and then processes it through. I know you probably have a better explanation than I do, but what is the purpose of the JSON in the first place?
It's really your set of instructions as to what to do. So it tells everything that runs inside of Einstein Analytics, this is what you need to process and move forward. So it's a handy way to expose instructions to people that don't have to go quite to the coding level where you have to write Apex or Java or any other language. You can change these files and have the system do different things.
Right. So as we're building these nodes, everything I have on the screen is here in the JSON. And if you make changes, it'll change in here for you. So you can go either way, work in both or just work in one. This is huge. Nobody explained this to me when I first started. And there was a time that EA was completely code. And so we used to number our, if we're pulling accounts, we might call it 100 for all of our extracts and 200 for an augment, so that we could go into the code and find the nodes we were looking for. Now we don't have to do that because we have the nodes right in front of us. They'll be changing again on the 18th, but we're not going to talk about that right now. Does anybody have questions at this point? Because I know this is a starting area for everybody on this call that's brand new. And some of you, you're probably watching this and you're on your phone, because this is, basic information, but I want to make sure we're not losing anybody during this. And you can also put your questions or comments in the chat too, if that helps. So the difference between, and I'm just going to kind of go along, please stop at any point if you have a question. So you might ask yourself, what is the difference between a regular digest and a SFDC digest? And before we go to the next digest, Sayantani, why is it named digest in the first place?
Because you're actually digesting the data. You're bringing the data in.
So if you were working with like a flow chart we've talked about before, or we were working with some other program, does digest mean anything anywhere else besides EA?
Not really. It's a term that's sometimes used in data science because you're literally digesting the data. It's a way of saying that this is the data that is going to form the base of everything else.
Okay.
So think about it, digest in general terms means food intake, right? So you are intaking something. So you are intaking the data.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense to me. So how would you explain, I don't have a regular digest on here, but what is the difference between a Salesforce and a regular digest? Because it looks the same.
It does look the same. There are subtle differences. So when you are doing SFDC digest, it's specifically digest node from Salesforce. When you are doing a digest from a regular digest, which looks like a satellite, that satellite actually, I know Jen is using something, but yes, the satellite actually means that is now an API connection. So it can be Heroku, it can be Google BigQuery, it can be AWS, it can be Snowflake, it can be any of the random too many things that we have under the connections. Jen, can you go to connections once? Not there. In the data manager and then connections. Connect. Click on connect to data on the right. Add connection. Yeah. Ooh. So now if you scroll down, these are all the available connectors that you can use. So when you use any of these, you are bringing the data from an external data source that is not related to Salesforce. Once you do that, it becomes an external API connection, and that's why you have the satellite, which tries to mean that it is an external thing and not readily available within Salesforce.
And
it's
in
not an
our
SFDC local.
company, in our company, we've had a lot of acquisitions. So when we have an acquisition, I have to connect to another Salesforce org and bring all their data in. And so there's actually a connect to another Salesforce org.
Correct. That's an external connector.
Yes.
Yep.
Does that make sense to everybody? And the part that you may find confusing, or at least like I did when I first started, is when I did this, it'll still let me go to my level. You know, so it'll still let you do what the other node did. So it's not going to say you have to use an external connector only. If you do use this and not a SFDC digest, you can still pull your data in, but there's a couple of just tiny features that that other node lets you do that this one doesn't. But it still will let you bring it in. I know.
Like you cannot edit. So if you, Jen, go back to a digest node. Any digest node. No, you have already one of those digest nodes. So if you look down and the fields, you have that pencil. If you use a regular connector, an external connector, you don't get access to these. This disappears. So you cannot edit your values, you cannot add a default value, or you cannot add a precision. Those kind of things don't happen.
Right. And so that's what a lot of people will accidentally use the other digest. And I'm one of those people when I first started. And then I was like, why can't I make this value null, or, you know, add a 0 in, you know, or modify. I want one of the fields from my pick list not available in here. You can't do any of that from the regular digest because it is meant for an external connection.
Correct. And when you do an external connection, it actually lets you add the values, as in change the time or the date time format. It allows you to change things like add the default values, those kind of things. It allows you to do those things. So see, you cannot do anything here.
Yeah. So you
That's
see
what happens.
Yeah, I wish somebody, I really wish I could go back in time and have somebody explain this to me, but I'm glad we're explaining it.
So that's the basic difference between why we use a SFDC connector instead of a Salesforce external API connectors.
And this one here, when I first started too, I was like, Edgemart, like Walmart, like what kind of mart do we have here? I'm a very visual person. And so when I see these, I'm like, oh, a stop sign that goes down. And you know, and I'm just talking from a very beginner, you know, I know data, but I don't know these symbols and I don't know these terms. Now I do, or I try. Sayantani, why is this one called an Edgemart? I know these three bring, I
have no idea. That might have come up with Salesforce. Salesforce
so
brings
Salesforce
that,
unique.
yeah.
So when if you go back to where Einstein was Wave, and before that it was EdgeSpring, which is the company. The
That's
object
right.
that stored data, the data set, it was called an Edgemart. That's where it came from. So the product was EdgeSpring, so things weren't stored in a data mart, they were stored in an Edgemart.
Aha.
That
See,
kind of
now we know
through.
this.
So what I'm going to do here is show you real quick. An Edgemart can be a little bit confusing, right? Because you can actually reference a data set that you've already built and are using in here, or you can actually load a spreadsheet in and pull that data. So it's going to access every available data set and any external. And when I say external, we're not talking about a connection to somewhere else. We're talking about a static spreadsheet that you've actually loaded into Analytics Studio. So the funny thing was, I was doing a user group and we were using cattle statistics because that resonates with people here, right? So if I wanted to, for whatever reason, say my clients are farmers or, you know, people that own, you know, produce companies, if I needed to add some extra data that didn't live in my Salesforce org, let's say, you know, well, let's see what we have here. If I bring in some cattle stats, which I know sounds really funny, but it's really cool. All of a sudden I have all these fields from it available. So this is just kind of some extra data, which is amazing. Like, for example, if you're a nonprofit, one of the best use cases I found is, let's say you have, like, you did an event, you have a volunteer spreadsheet, and you want to know how many donors, that donate to your nonprofit or also volunteers, is kind of, you can go out of your Salesforce box and bring in data and analyze it that you couldn't do with just your Salesforce data alone. So EdgeMart is bringing in anything you've already built, or any data set you've already built, or any, and I'm just going to call it a spreadsheet because that's what everybody knows, a spreadsheet that you've brought in of extra data, and you can add it to your data flow.
Right. So any data that already exists in your in Einstein Analytics in that org, plus any CSV file that you have uploaded into Einstein Analytics, you should be able to bring it in as an EdgeMarted data.
Right, and I always call them EMs just because I know they're EdgeMarts, but you could call it, spreadsheet one, cattle stats, farm stats, volunteer, whatever you want, and then you can use any field in here to attach it, even a date if you wanted to, though I don't recommend working so much with dates because they can be tricky, but let's say county. We want to know everything that's going on in the counties. This data is, associated with what our accounts, address of the county and their addresses. We, the sky's the limit, which is the beautiful part. Anybody have any questions about EdgeMarts? I'm just going to leave this node down here just for example. Now you can build this and you can make all the nodes that you want. It's just not going to produce any data because we haven't used that node yet. This is a register, which would be the last one that you use. So even if you bring in all these nodes and play with them, you're not actually like doing anything until you register and create a data set with them. All right, do you think we've done enough on the, so the way I remember it is the first three right here are how you bring data in for your data flow in the first place. And once again, questions can go in the chat too if you have them, and we can address them later. All right, you want to move on to something a little bit trickier. Do you want me to do augment or append first?
Let's start with append. That's easier. So append literally means appending data. So you have 100 rows with, say, 10 columns. You have another table with 200 rows and another 10 columns. A few things that you need to be careful about is the API names on both the data sets have to be exactly the same. You cannot append a data set with 10 columns and another with 5 columns. That doesn't work. It has to, all the columns have to be the same and have to be of the same number with the same API names. That is when it goes and appends itself. Otherwise, you use exactly what Jen did, which is called a disjoint schema.
Yeah, and that's something, a lot of times when you're a beginner, you don't use this very often. I can tell you it was quite a while before I actually used append because to me, I didn't really understand, like what am I appending, and recently in my job right now, we have two CPQ systems, right? We have Steelbrick and another one that's just called CPQ. And somebody said, oh, just do an append. And in my mind, I'm like, well, what key do they use? How do I join them? Well, as long as the columns match up and they basically contain sort of the same data, maybe give or take a row, or you just want all your CPQ in the same data set, it just adds those extra rows under it. And exactly. That's like how I use append now, is just when I need kind of the same data from another source, but in the same data set. But it's not a parent to a child. It's just, imagine a big spreadsheet and I want 100 more rows at the bottom. Carl, do you have anything else that you could add to like append to make it easy?
The only thing I would add, it goes outside of append sometimes, is using computer expressions to get your data consistent before you append, so things append nicely. I've done that quite a few times where I want to have it append not based off of names, but two things that are named separately. Well, I can make them the same name so that they append and everything is great in the end.
Right. Okay. So
some of the other transformations that we're going to talk about next.
Yeah, we
So-
haven't talked about compute expression yet, but just like you said, that's what I could create more fields in this node we're going to talk about, and then append it into those brand new fields that I made.
Jen, can you give me access once?
Yes. If I can figure out like how to get the.
Just stop sharing on top of your screen.
On the new, oh, stop share, got it.
Okay, so let me show you what append is.
I can build data flows, but I can't run a meeting.
So what you are looking here is exactly what append looks like. So you have 4 columns, A, B, C, D, and these are your numbers. All we are doing is we are joining the first table with the second table to form one giant table. It's as simple as that. So here it says downtown trees, Kitsilano trees. You're joining them to form Vancouver trees. That's it. It's a real simple thing. Not complicated. So I will give you the access
It's funny
back.
what is complicated to one person and not to another. That's what makes EA very special, right? Because some people come right in here and do formulas, no problem. Other people, formulas are the last thing that they do. So just be easy on yourself the first time you're working with this, because you may find that, you know, what was simple for another person may be the last thing that you're going to learn. And that's okay. That's how we all do it. All right.
Yep.
So this next node, oh, we went backwards here.
So Jen, there's a question. Is this similar to union in SQL?
Right, that's what I think.
Sorry?
Oh yeah. If you're a SQL person, and that's going to come back around here next year.
No, this is not union in SQL.
Right, right.
No. Don't confuse SQL with Salesforce terminologies and Einstein Analytics terminologies. They will not make too much of sense. So ideally, yeah, keep them separate, and anything you do in SQL is not always transferable to Salesforce or Einstein Analytics. Similarly, everything you do in Salesforce or Einstein Analytics is not transferable to SQL.
Exactly. So this next node that we're going to use is an augment. And this is probably one of the most important nodes outside of bringing your data in and registering it. Just so everybody knows, because I'm going to be like my authentic self here. The first time I ever used this, I didn't understand. And when I thought it looked like Tetris. I'm like, what am I stacking on top of something else? Now it makes sense to me. But the first time you augment, remember, augment is a join. So you're joining. So if anybody here is an admin, it's the same as maybe adding a related list, like you're on the account page and you're going to make a related list to contacts. Or maybe you're on the contacts page and you're going to make a related list to a custom object you have about the contacts. So this is a very important node. It's how we join two different data set or objects together from Salesforce. So to make this a little bit easier for you, I'd already pre-built this, but let's go ahead and just open a new one and see what we can do with it. So it's going to ask you what to call it. Some people call it join. I call it aug just because that's the name of it. And I'll probably, as the new UI comes out, find something else to name it. But I wanted to bring in opportunities to accounts. So I'm going to augment ops to accounts. Your naming convention can be what it means to you. It can be something a little bit more professional than what I've put on here, but this is just a name that resonates with me. So my left source, which is going to be your main object, that's going to be my accounts. So what we're going to do is, wow, okay, we already have the accounts in here. I don't have to pull them in because we already did that. And we're going to use the account ID because IDs are great. Never have enough IDs. And then we're going to call the relationship ops. And this is very important that you name your relationship name, something that means the data that you're joining. And it's always it's always what's on your related list. It's always your secondary data, the relationship names. I can't tell you how many times in the beginning I work with this and I name this accounts, right? Because I'm like, oh, I'm bringing accounts, that's the relationship. No, we're bringing in the right side, which would be, like I said, your related list, your child object or another object. So for the right source, so we're naming what our right source is going to be. And so I'm going to go in here and say, oh, well, get this, Sayantani, we didn't bring in opportunities yet. What happens? So how many of you have been here where I'm at right now, where I'm like, okay, I need to do this. And then I'm like, oh, I don't have opportunities on here. Well, you can go ahead and create this. It's not going to be finished. And then we can go up here and we can do another digest, and we're going to name this extract ops. And I'm just doing this fast. I probably do this a little bit better if I was doing this like an introduction mode, but just for the sake of showing you that it's normal that you build this and you forgot a piece, right? And I'm going to put the account ID and the regular ID and the name, you know, just our basic fields that we would use in Salesforce and here. And we don't have any conditions. We don't have anything fancy. We're going to create it. And let me see if I can color these. Okay, got those colored. Okay, so now we can go back to what we built and say, okay, you see how fast I did that? I don't expect anybody on here who's brand new to do this fast as me. I've been this all day for my job. But now we can go back and say, okay, right source, I need ops.
So a quick point while Jen is doing this. So IDs. In Salesforce, when you look at reports, you get a 15-character Salesforce ID. And when you download and try doing any kind of change in Excel using that, you have a problem because at times you have the same combination of same combination for different IDs or different records. So and that's why it's always preferable to use the 18 digit so that you don't fall into those loopholes. Einstein Analytics by default uses the 18 character Salesforce IDs. So you don't have the problem of the case sensitivity or any of those things.
Yeah. And the other thing is too, if you have two IDs, somebody pinged me this morning and actually asked me, is it okay if I use two IDs? Like, let's say I needed to match it on the ID and the name, or the ID and, you know, another field in there. Yeah, you can use two if that's what you need to do to be more specific with your data. But just know when you do that, it can get a little crazy and you're going to take your data down to, you know, instead of seeing everything, you're only going to see what the two match or the three match versus what the one matches. So we know that opportunities, or, you know, any object that's attached to an account in Salesforce is going to have the account ID with it. So we're using the account ID of the opportunity as the join. And we only brought in these fields, the ID and the name. And that's all, say, for this use case we need. Now, in this case, you know, we don't really have to worry about one opportunity being attached to many accounts, but let's say we did it reverse. Let's say that, you know, one account can have many opportunities. So that's when you would choose between a single value and a lookup, or I'm sorry, and a multi-value lookup. Because it's depending on, are you looking for a one-to-one? Is this opportunity going to match one account, or is it going to match many accounts? Well, it's only going to match one because that's the way our data is in here.
So Kevin is asking, and I'll just clarify, Einstein Analytics uses 18 character IDs always, not 15. So anywhere, even if you are doing security predicates, which we are going to show you at the most probably at the end of this, always remember that if you're using the security predicates, the group names or the role types, it will always, please take the 18 characters, otherwise it's not going to work.
So we're going to save this. And now look, we have another join. For those of you who are brand new to this, you don't have to, in a data flow, make only one data set. You can make many data sets in here. So anywhere that you want to pull data from along the way. Now, be careful what you wish for, right? Because this could get super complicated when you go back in and try and edit it. But in this case, I already had a register here, you know, for what I had built prior to us being in this meeting. But now we're building something else. So I could actually just register this as a data set and it's going to bring in those fields. And then if I wanted to register here, I could, and we haven't got to register yet, but that's how you create your data set.
Also, to add to Jen's point, when you run data flows, all data sets in that specific data flow is always going to run together. So you cannot say, I want to run a part of the data flow and not the rest of the things. That doesn't happen. The whole thing runs or nothing runs.
Yes, exactly. So if you have an unfinished node, you started working and you know, went to save your work and run it, it's not going to let you because there's an incomplete, you know, when this was gray, when I was first working on it. So it is intuitive enough to let you know that you have some unfinished work in there. If you have errors and that'll be a whole nother meeting for us to have, but you know, troubleshooting errors, or if you make, you know, mistakes somewhere along the way. But what we're doing here, we're using their UI. Unless there's something wrong with the data, we're pretty good here. There isn't going to be any errors. So do you have anything else to add about an augment, which, like I said, is going to be like your third most important? You're bringing it in, you're creating it, but joining is going to be about your third most important.
Right. I'm going to take a step back. So basically, there are only two nodes that are extremely important when you are doing a data flow: the digest node and the register. Digest and register creates your data set. You do not need anything else. But that is like saying I have a CSV file, upload it again, but via data flow. It doesn't make much sense. So that's why we use the augments, which means basically I'm joining two objects or two data sets, two CSV files, any combination of the above. That's why we use that. We use things like filters, computer expressions, whatever you can see on Jen's screen. We use all of this just to change. It's basically, in terms, you can say it's an ETL tool: extract, transform, and load. When you're doing digest, you're extracting the data. When you are using any of the augments, appends, joins, computer expressions, relatives, filters, you're transforming the data. Then when you finish it, when you're registering it, it's load. So basically it's an ETL tool in some ways.
Right. And the reason these two are together is because you're adding data or you're joining data. So, you know, they've kind of separated these, which I didn't understand when I first was working with it. They've separated these buttons into kind of what they do all together. Otherwise, they would just have them all in a row if they were all the same, right?
Exactly. And that's why, Jen, can you do the coloring again so people understand there are some of the things that have added? Yep. So as you can see, the color of this augment ops to accounts, this just changed. So the reason we use this tool, and I'll post the name of the tool, it's by Matthew Howard. He works for Telstra in Australia. He has an extremely good plugin for Chrome, which lets you color your data flow so that at one glance you understand where all your nodes are.
So it's this, I don't know if you guys can see this, but it's
we can.
Helper. And we will post that link in the chat. But if you just search EA Dashboard Helper in your plugins, you should be able to have it. And then it's Control-Shift-L. Make sure.
It's, or Command-Shift-L if you're a Mac user, but yes.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yes. Okay, so before we get into the really, really fun stuff, because this is everybody's favorite node who works with this, it's a little bit complex the first time that you're working with it. Do you have any questions about what you see? And even if you're brand new, gauge for us on there, like, is this helpful? Is this confusing? You know, we can get back to you afterwards if there's something you need more information about.
Or you want us to take it slow and explain things a little more in detail, we can do that as well. So open to the floor for the next 2 or 3 minutes because we are at the hour. And this is going to take another hour at least to explain the rest. So,
yeah, the people that are on here are in here for the long haul.
Yep. So questions, concerns? Nothing?
I'm realizing I don't think you can find this anywhere, what we're talking.
No, you won't.
This is just what we do every day.
Okay, I think Carl has dropped off because he has a meeting.
Yes.
I don't see, Catherine, do you want to say something?
No, I don't have anything to add. I mean, this is a good start. I'd love to hear other people's thoughts about more naming conventions, because that's all I love to talk naming conventions.
I was going to say you're the naming convention queen.
I mean, I have a question about what people do for augments. Like, say you are augmenting, I mean, maybe you have, I don't know, contacts and their accounts. So I would say, you know, augment, I like to start with the left side. So contacts, accounts. And then I want to add something else to that. So now I've got this augment called augment contacts accounts. And I don't know.
Yes.
Maybe I have a custom object or something. And I don't want to say augment contacts accounts custom object. So do you guys do like a shorthand? Or kind of
so if we were taking these two, like for example, if I was augmenting this augment to this augment, right? So you have and these two, right?
Because it can get really complex. I'm just kind of curious. I was doing one the other day where everything's built off of opportunities, and I keep adding on extra. Like now I'm adding the users. Now I'm adding one custom object. Now I'm adding accounts, and I just started doing augment, you know, opportunity plus whatever, because it made sense in that situation.
And then it gets very, very long. And
yes,
I want to say before we answer how, I know everybody does it equal, but when you're looking at these notes, obviously it's only showing you this first part, right? So if they keep saying the same thing in the beginning, but then you're adding what the new part of the augment is doing to the end, you're not going to see it from here. And that took me a while to figure out, because I go through my notes and say, which one is all four of those augments with one more thing added onto it, and I can't see the end, so they all look like they're the same. So I always encourage people to reverse it on new. And like, why is this? Obviously, this is account, this is ops, this is easy. But what if we had these two together? How would you differentiate them, right? And so I would maybe if I'm say, for example, joining this two different ways, I'd put, you know, this augment to this augment one, this augment to this augment two, right? If it's the same kind of data, but I'm just doing something different. Like sometimes I will actually number them and have the number first, so that I know that this is one, augment two, and then it'll say afterwards what it does. What do you do, Sayantani?
I depends. So sometimes I do add the names, but I try to shorten the names slowly. So instead of actually writing contacts, I might just say CTS. And I do have some naming conventions in my head. So I keep a consistent flow of that. So basically accounts can just be ACC, contacts is just CTS, those kind of things. So that doesn't become so unwieldy and so difficult to understand what is going on.
So like if I was to do this, right? And then we, even though it's not finished, which would be these two, obviously you can see this in the front, but then you're like, what does this other part do? So that's why I reverse them. Or we'll put the extension in the beginning, shortened of what it does, another underscore, and then all the rest of the information.
So my concern with doing that is normally I follow the left join, right join. So my first is augment or join / what is on the left and what is on the right. If you do this, it reverses, right? And then you have to go in and see what's actually going on.
Right, right. So this is another subject we should definitely dip into, because I have like an augment festival going on in my production. You know, we've got 300 and something nodes, and everything augments to everything else. And just the other day, somebody asked, you know, how are you dipping into, you know, our spreadsheet in your, they call it the TM augment, right? And I thought, oh, I'll just type in TM and then I'll be able to find it. Well, when you search up here, it doesn't search on relationships, right? So if the relationship,
no, it doesn't. It's on the node names.
Yeah, so a lot of times I'm actually going into the JSON, to figure out which node it is, because I can't make all of them appear on my screen because there's so many of them. So this is a good subject for us to address in another meeting, because I would like to kind of collaborate and figure out like how best to do this. So you don't, it's like you've made a buffet, right? But then you can't find the one thing you want to eat. So
yeah. I'm curious to see how this changes with data prep. I haven't really played around with the new one, but I couldn't get by without this Chrome extension, because really visually, that's how I see how things are.
That made our life so much more easier.
Right, and I'm really glad you asked that, because that's something, it's a little bit advanced, but it's something everybody who works with architecture is going to have to learn, right? You end up doing what we're doing and searching through you either search node by node and open them up, or you go into the JSON and try and, control F it. So, all right, I'm going to take this one down. Great question.
Thanks, Catherine. I'm going to ask someone who is very new to this.
Yes.
Let's ask Annie.
I want to know what Annie thinks right now, if she's overwhelmed or if she
exactly. And she's not responding. Guessing she has, yeah. Okay, so are you overwhelmed by what you're seeing, or?
I'm usually a little more overwhelmed looking at the Gobi data flows. So this is this is nice and bare bones, or more bare bones than what Sayantani is usually showing me. But it is a little bit, difficult not being in the context of our own org and, with
yes,
I understand. So I think making that connection is a little bit more of a challenge.
And I'm going to go into a big one just for reference, my sandbox, so everybody on the call understands when we're talking about when they get really big, what happens. Sorry, I got to move some stuff around here. I think we're going to run into the same problem from what I've already done, though, Catherine, on your point on the data prep. From what I've already done, it looks like we're going to have the same issue, because you still name the nodes, but
yeah, you still name the nodes, exactly.
All right, so this is one of my big ones. I don't have it colored, but I think it scrolls 8 pages. So imagine if somebody asked you to pull like one node, how would you find it, right? Like, and if it's not going to show up, like if I put TM, and once it
doesn't exist.
It didn't, see how it didn't, like, okay, where's that relationship? So then I have to remember, oh my gosh, did I name the node something different than the relationship name, right? And so what I end up doing is this, where I say, okay, I named everything augment. Now, some of it, mind you, this is in Sandbox. So we've had some other people naming things differently. But if I type in the first 3 letters of aug, I'm going to find pretty much all the augments. And so back in the day when we didn't have a UI, some of our developers here, obviously numbered them so that they could find them easy. I don't do that. But this kind of gives you an example when you're looking at your joins, and see how big these get. This is exactly what Catherine was talking about, right? Is they can get really big or they can get really small. And so, account owner augment, we don't know what it's augmenting to. So this is kind of a good example to show you that you build it and build it and build it, and then all of a sudden you're like, wow, okay, I made this great data flow, but now that when I need to find something, I can't find something. And then you probably have to go back and make some naming conventions, which is okay. But that's why I keep this old data flow in here, is just for this reason when I'm training people to say, like, if you don't name things correctly, this is what happens. So let me go back over to see how much better this one is than that one.
Yes, so basically those are the kind of things that when you actually do it in your production org, and if it is a large one like ours, you will face these problems, and these are always good to know. But also remember that try not to make something so giant that you cannot find things. Like when I started at Gobi and took over Einstein Analytics, I also had a 300 node data set. And I actually broke it down because it didn't make much sense to have that with millions of rows running through it. So to put it into perspective, Jen runs around 40 million rows of data through her data flows every day. We run 200 million. So there's no way I can finish anything in time if I'm running just one single data flow with 200 million rows. It's never going to end.
Right, right.
So
And
those are
I,
cases you need to be careful about how long does it take to run? Which of these should be running more frequently? Which can be an overnight run or a weekly run? Separate those out into different data flows because you right now have 100 data flows, right? So separate them out and then accordingly work with them.
yeah, and just remember, the longer you build your data flow, the bigger it is, the longer it's going to take to process.
Exactly.
So you can have a lot of little ones, or you can have one. And that was a big question I had in the beginning too, is does it make more sense for me to make a lot of smalls and then just put the data together in the dashboard? Or should I just go ahead and put it all together so when I pull it up in the dashboard, I have everything I need? And that's something you can really only answer in your own org, because it just depends on the skill level of people. The reason we have that giant one is most of our users, and we, oh gosh, I think we're up to like 8,000 users. This is the biggest company I've ever worked at. So 8,000 users, they don't know SAQL. So when they're going to make a dashboard, or even, you know, how to connect data, right? They just want to run what they want to run. So we have to make these very complex data sets that have a lot of data in them. So they have every field that they need. And that's the beauty of our job, right? That's, you know, being the architect, is we can make them small or we can make them as, you know, tall as the Empire State.
It also depends. It also depends on the point that when you are joining a few other nodes, is it being used only in one single dashboard? Then prefer a dashboard instead of running it through the data flow, because it's going to take more time doing it in the data flow. For dashboard, maybe it is going to take you time to create it in the dashboard a little longer, but ultimately it's just one dashboard which is always going to run as is. It's not going to stop running because because of the data changed or something. So there are different concerns and ideas of how you should be working with when to use a dashboard and when to use a data flow. But ultimately it's totally up to your convenience as to which one you prefer, and also on the company as to what do they want you to do.
Yeah, there's a right way, like there's and that was
exactly, there's no right way.
You know, it's like, should I just make this giant one or should I make a bunch of small ones? And you know what I did? I did it both ways. And then I asked the client, this was back when I was in consulting, I asked the client which one they preferred, right? And then showed them the pros and cons of each. And then we went with, you know, I think at that time we actually went with a lot of smalls and one big one. So they had a choice. So you can do that too. You can do it both ways if you want. Like if you have your accounts in its own data set, and then you can have accounts with everything related to it in that data set, and then people can do what they want with it.
Before we move on, Kevin has a question.
Yes.
Can you rename a node in the Dataflow JSON? Yes, totally. But remember to rename everywhere the same node.
Yeah, and if you're going to actually rename it in the JSON and not use the UI, you're going to have to
download it and upload it.
I usually have about 20 pages of Notepad++ open during the day, you know, sketching things out. But that's taken me, what, 3-4 years to get to where I'm at, where I can do it in the JSON. If you rename it here, for example, if I say, I don't want write on this, right? I want to name it something else. And I save it. When you run it, it just runs with this new name on it. So it's not going to hurt anything by renaming it. It's just you want to make sure if there's other people working in there, they know that you renamed it.
Okay, let's move on.
Yeah, and I'm realizing we have a lot more complex nodes in here. So let's have some fun. This is the favorite node right here. You will learn to love compute expression. Sayantani, why is it named compute expression?
Because it's literally you are giving an expression to the fields. You're creating a new field with an expression in the sense a formula. So f of x, when we did maths in high school, early college life, f of x used to be an expression, right? It's the same thing. F of x is function. You're putting a function and creating a new column. That's it.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Sorry?
Oh, I think somebody's talking to their children, and that's cool during pandemic because mine is in there playing video games right now. Thank goodness for video games. Yeah, the first time I was going to use a compute expression, this really scared me, right? Just the name of it, you know, like, and now that I've used it for several years, I relate it, if you're an admin, to you're creating a formula field, but instead of creating one formula field, you can create all the formula fields you want. And any kind of syntax, you know, it can be text, it can be a number, it can be a count. So this is my favorite. If somebody was to ask me, I don't know, I like compute relative too, but I think compute expression is my favorite node. This is what a geek I am. So I already have one in here, but let me show you what it looks like if we were going to make one. I usually name mine CE. Some people will call it, you know, like count or calculate. They'll actually name it what they're going to do with it. But because you can make more than one new field on there, if you name it what the first field did, and then later on you make 10 more fields, it's not going to really represent. So, you know, a lot of times we'll call it, you know, for now, let's just say CE op calcs. So we're just going to use it just to make, you know, calcs on opportunities. But then again, if you're making a text field, it's not really a calculation. But this is a harder node to name. When I first started in this job, so everybody knows, I had some that were just called compute expression. Somebody just named this node what it was. And I'm like, okay, I'm okay with that. So if we were going to do that, I'm going to use the one I already built because it's really simple. The first time, I don't know who on here knows Pete Lyons, but I tried to watch his compute expression videos and he goes really fast and I have to freeze the screen and be like, how's he doing that? And I don't understand. So I want to go really slow so that you understand this is not hard. This is really fun. So all I wanted on my contacts was to count them so that when I join them, I know how many are joining. Really easy. And it's just like a roll-up field in Salesforce. So I named it CE count contacts. I chose contacts as, you know, where I brought the contacts in is to where I wanted to count them. And if I didn't have this on here, it would say create this add field, right? Sayantani, if you want to add anything here, I probably should go through this one a little bit quicker just so we get to the rest of the more complex nodes.
Yeah, we started late, so if everyone is cool with it, we can continue it a little longer. There are a few things I would like to add here. One, you cannot do in compute expressions. Compute expressions, first of all, takes SQL expressions. But when you go to a dashboard and go to a SQL, you can do things like sum, minimum, maximum, all those aggregations. You cannot do any aggregation. So
like you can't add up if there was, say, a number like how much this person spent, right, with the company.
You cannot use sum of something. You can do is field 1 plus field 2. You can do that. But you cannot do sum of or minimum of a field. Those are called aggregating functions and those are not allowed. Second, when you're doing compute expressions, an excellent tool to use is case statements. Please, please, please try understanding how case statements work because it is going to save you your life.
Right.
Trust us on that.
There's no one place you can go out to find like, oh, where's the cookbook of every formula I'd ever have to use, because there's just so many formulas. A lot of people make their own cookbooks. Ask the community if you get stuck. I know when I started, I asked, if you go back a couple years in the community, I'm asking every time I do a calculation, right? Like, how do I, you know, if there's an ID, I want it to say true. And if there's not an ID, I want it to say false, right? How do I do that? And somebody will just write it in the community for you.
Correct. So case statement, so a very good use case of case statement is flags. As Jen was explaining, if there is an ID, then true. If there is no ID, then false. Those kind of things, or this is a duplicate or this is not a duplicate. Those kind of things are extremely useful to for case statements. Now, Once you create a case statement or a compute expression using something like that, where it's an yes, no, or there are 3 or 4 fields, and you want to only filter the data where it is true or where it is false, just use a simple filter node, which we are going to show you a little later. And actually, we can do it right here. Jen, can you go to the filter node? Let's go to the filter node real quick. So you just put the node name, put the compute expressions node as the source, and then just say that which it gives you, say stage name is equal to closed one. So basically use a SQL expression. If you don't use a SQL expression, it becomes a SOQL. So be mindful of what you're using.
So for example, I always use this. This isn't going to work with my data in here, but for example, I'd say I only want, you know, the billing state has to equal Texas, right? I only want that one state in here. And you're going to be like, what are the, why is there two?
Well, that's not going to work for you because there's a space between those two words.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So what's wrong with this, right? This is a billing state. If it's a standard field, the API name is going to be this. So that's another thing that you might, when you see on here, you might want to pay a little bit of attention to is see how stage name is the API name with no space, even though it's, you know, it's called stage a lot of times opportunity. So you want to use your API names always. And then
also,
oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Also, you can see the closed one is in double quotes. So there are a few things that I would like to add to compute expressions and filters. One, when you are doing a compute expression and you have a field name, ensure that it is enclosed in single quotes. Field names should always be enclosed in single quotes. Enclosing this in single quotes tells you that now this is a field name which I want to be greater than or equal to or whatever the hell I want. When you're doing a text, it should be enclosed in double quotes always. And if you're doing something like a number, it should not have anything enclosed in. So if you're doing, say, count is equal to 1, it should be just the number 1 without any double quotes. So those are the kind of things you should be careful about and understand what is going on. Also, in Einstein analytics, true and false comes in as it's not a Boolean. It's basically a text. So when you're using true or false, those also should be enclosed in double quotes. Questions? I know I went very fast with this.
Yeah, this one we could have a meeting on by itself. And there's a lot of anomalies in here to the rules of what you would know in like traditional Salesforce. And I definitely want everybody to understand that whatever we build here in EA is not manipulating your native Salesforce data. So if I make a count, this is not going back into Salesforce and giving you an extra roll up, right?
Correct.
It's entirely
and it is not going to change the other data sets that you have pulled in. Like if you have pulled in a CSV file or if you have pulled in some other edge-marted data, it's not going to affect them. It is going to create a whole new data set for you.
Right. So, you know, there's a limit to roll-ups in Salesforce. And I always use roll-ups because that's like my easiest way of learning a CE, because obviously you see that you just put 1 in there because our count equals 1. Don't beat yourself up the first time that you're starting to use these if you don't understand why am I putting 1 here, but it doesn't work like that with a different formula, right? Because they all do what they do for reasons. And you don't always have to understand all of those reasons. You just kind of have to remember how they work. And then when you go to do this yourself, you're going to be, you know, trying it out and learning as you go. And that's the best way. That's really the only way to learn these nodes, right? Is to work with them yourself. Now you might see this at the bottom. And I think it's important that we tell people about this before we move on, because this was a huge pain point for me. I had no idea what is precision and scale. So if I make a number, right, and I'm just counting, why is it asking me this scary statistical term, right? Sayantani, what is the precision here? What do I need to write here?
Okay, so precision and scale. Precision and scale. Precision is the total number of characters that go into forming a number. So if instead of 1, that was say 1 2 3 4 5 dot 6 7 8, that means that 1 2 3 4 5 6 escape the decimal. The whole thing is your precision. So how many characters are there in your in the number? Scale is how many numbers are there after your decimal.
So
So
if I'm only counting and it's a 1, do I have 1 character on the?
yes, it becomes 1, right? Because it's always 1.
Yay! And then I don't have a decimal because it's whole numbers, right?
Correct.
So this would be your left side of the number, and this would be your right side. Well, I should say left side of the decimal and right side of the decimal. So this can't be bigger than that one, right? Because right, it'll
of course not, because precision is the sum of what is on the left and what is on the right.
Right, and this is a good place too, that if it doesn't find a value, you can put a default value in here. And you know, that's nice, because a lot of times we just have blanks. So if you just want a 0 where there's no count, you can put, well, of course, first rule of EA, for those of you who work with it, null is null is null, right? If there's no records, there's no records. But in the case that you have one that doesn't meet your criteria, you can put a 0 in there. I think that's a good starter for compute expressions. This one, once again, could take a whole nother meeting.
Yes, compute expressions and compute relatives can actually
So we
we
extracted contacts, we're counting our contacts, and then we're joining them. So it's going to, so if we're joining 100 contacts to accounts, it's going to give us a total of 100. So that's our reasoning for doing this. You want to go to the next one?
Compute relative. Let's come back. Let's do the rest.
Okay. Yeah. You want to do filter?
Yeah. Let's do filter, slice, and then we'll come back.
Okay. So filter. All right. I want to filter my data. Are we having questions? I'm seeing a pop-up here.
Yeah. Is there a document that shows the difference between SQL and SOQL? Not really. Not that I have seen. Okay. So I'm going to go back. I keep explaining this to everyone, and some people here already know I talk about this a lot. There are 3 things: SQL, SAQL, and SOQL. Actually, give me a second, and I'm going to pull up the presentation that I had recently given about it. Let's see.
Salesforce Analytics Query Language, Salesforce Object Query Language, and then regular old SQL, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm the layman terms person here.
Come on. Actually, no, I don't have the presentation with me anymore, but yes. So SQL is structured query language. Structured query language is basically a way of saying that I'm querying the data, which can join multiple things together and form a database. Every organization that uses databases uses SQL or some form of SQL, and they name it differently because, like, Yahoo calls it YAQL. Similarly, there's some other person who calls it something else. So it varies. SOQL is Salesforce Object Query Language, which means that anything in SOQL in Salesforce, you can query based on that language. And it is very different from SQL. It uses the terminologies in SQL, but you cannot do everything in SQL in SOQL. It varies how much you can do and how much you cannot do. Like if you're using SOQL, you can go up to a limit of 4 objects at a time up the hierarchy. You cannot go more than that. Those kind of limits don't exist in SQL, but exist in SOQL. Similarly, if you are looking for SAQL, which is what we use in Einstein Analytics, it's called Salesforce Analytics Query Language. Salesforce Analytics Query Language is basically PigQL. It used to exist or still exists. We use that, and this is totally extremely different from SQL and SOQL. It has nothing in common, to say the least. It's very, very different, and that's how we use it. Coming back to the point of SQL, Einstein Analytics is trying to bring in SQL into Einstein Analytics. The product team is trying to do that just so that people who don't understand SQL and SQL can still use it.
Yes. Yeah.
Hoping it makes things clear and not more confusing for everyone here.
Right. And the way that like I dumb that down in my layman brain is SQL, like for example, that's on the back end of your dashboards. It's what we sometimes use in formulas in here. And SQL is like what you would use in Workbench when you're trying to pull different, data from an object. SQL is something you won't use very often unless you need it in EA. All right, I'm gonna pull a filter node up here. Sorry, my kid is going crazy on his video game. That's like 25 feet away from me, and it sounds like it's in here. Okay, so if you want to filter, Sayantani, why would we use this filter and not say this filter where it says filter conditions?
Okay, so when you add a filter, Jen, do you have data sync open in this org? So can you go back to connect?
Mm-hmm.
So open one of these things. Okay, so here you can see that Jen actually has a filter on group. Can you click on group and continue and hit the filter icon on top? Okay, so this is what happens. When you add a filter to a digest node, it filters the source of the data set, which is your data sync. Now, what will happen is if you have multiple data flows using the same digest node, they are also getting filtered. So until and unless you really want to do that, never use a filter directly on the digest node. Use a second filter called using the filter node and not directly on the digest node itself.
Yeah, I don't do this because I always want to pull all my data in because I might need it. So when you're pulling it all into Salesforce, I kind of keep everything that we need there. But then when I go to my data flows, I say, okay, today's the day, right? We're going to filter some data. And they give you the same example as what we just saw, right? So you could just say this. Filters actually got a lot easier than they used to be, which is cool. So let's just
filters
say,
at one point of time used to take only SQL and they would not really work the way you wanted to. That changed.
Say filter stage name, close. You could actually name what your filter was doing here. But what I'm going to do is I could either tap directly into my opportunities or my opportunities and accounts. So I'm going to go into opportunities and accounts and say, I want to see the accounts with opportunities that the stage name equals closed one. But you could go directly from just opportunities and do that. And so I think a lot of people get confused because it's like, where do I put the filter? Do I put it after the object I'm pulling in? Do I put it after I've added it to another object? The sky's the limit. And then once again, that would be your use case. Depending on where you put it, it's going to give you different results.
So I will add to that. So there are different use cases for all of these. When you are using, if you use directly after the digest node, the processing time goes down after that. If the field already exists on the digest node, your processing time for each of the nodes, because now it's joining from say a million rows, it's joining say 750k rows, it goes down, the time really goes down. So if you have something like that, use it directly after the digest node. If you are using a compute expression, then use the filter after the compute expression, because you cannot use a filter without the column existing, right? So you need the column to exist. Similarly, if you have to filter based on two different data sets, like the joined object or the augmented object, then use it after that augmented object. The earlier you filter, so two things: the earlier you do a compute expression, the better it is for the data set. The earlier you do a filter, the better it is for your data flow runs.
And in this case, because we did it after the augment, we would actually have to do this.
So go to the output fields, Jen, and start typing in stage name or whatever.
Oh, it's my search not going to work today.
No. You have to keep typing the whole thing.
Oh, you know what? I probably didn't put stage name in here because if it's not in the output,
nothing is going to work. Perfect.
We live off that stage name.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I'd have to go to my join and add it.
It's already there. You propagated. So
it did it for me. Yay. Okay. So now we would go in here and
go to the output fields
mm-hmm.
and now search for stage name.
Sometimes
it's not searching for you.
It just does this sometimes. It's just one of.
I still don't see stage name.
Oh, here it is because it's part of the.
Yeah. So basically, the easiest way I do is exactly what Jen is doing. I copy and paste from the output fields. I don't want to keep anything ambiguous or put a wrong field and then after a 3-hour data flow or 4-hour data flow, at times 12-hour data flow runs and it fails. I don't want to see that happen. So
if it has a relationship name, you're going to have to put the single quotes around it.
Yes.
If it's your right object. It's kind of something you have to learn after you do it a couple times and it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
But this is how we would.
As we were explaining before, field names always enclose, even in dashboards, it's always a good idea to have your field's name enclosed in single quotes and texts in double quotes.
And so I don't know, this is a dev org, so I'm going to hope that we have some that are one in here. Let's hope all of them are one, right? But you can put any criteria that you want. Like I said, I like to, use like, one state of accounts or something, easy to tell people. But since opportunity is one of like the main objects that people will be using EA for, kinds of reasons you would want to filter, maybe just opportunities last quarter, right? So ways to do those formulas as well. All right, we'll just leave that beautiful filter right there. And so what that's going to do is going to take our data down to just meeting that criteria. And then the processing time will be less because we're also only looking at these records versus all records. Which one do you want to do now?
Let's do slice. It's an interesting one.
It's funny because slice, I'm always like, which one of these makes a slice? Oh, this one. Why this picture for slice, Sayantani?
You are slicing the data. You are literally, so if you look at it, there are 3 columns, right? There, look at the picture carefully. Can you zoom in so people can see the.
Oh, let me do this.
Yeah, so you can see that there are actually 3 columns and on two of them, there's a cross. So basically you're removing 2 of those columns.
All right, so what do we want to slice and dice here? So we're going to slice. You know what? I think, in my opportunities, for whatever reason, I don't need like a name or, it like, maybe at the end of this, you decided there's an extra piece of data that you don't want, you can take it now or take it off. How would you explain that, Sayantani? Like, okay, I have this data set, I have everything I need in here, but there's one little thing that I need to keep or one little thing I need to drop. How do I know what to keep and what to drop?
So what I do for slice is when you create a data set, there's something called an optimizer that runs. So the more number of columns you have, the more time the optimizer takes to optimize the data set and then create the data set. So if you know there are 10 columns and 5 of them are called accounts for some reason, or you might, and they are all the same things, you might just want to drop them. Think about it in a way that you have accounts and opportunities and leads, all of them have the account name in common. So when you are joining the opportunities to the accounts, you are bringing in the account name from the opportunities and also from the account name itself, which is, why are we doing that? It's the same thing. It has the same data. So drop one of those fields. Why do we want to keep 2 fields which make no sense? Because it's just a copy of the other. So those are,
so for example, we just brought in the account ID twice.
Correct.
Because we joined the opportunities to accounts.
Correct. So basically, if you're doing accounts _ C and also an account ID, you can just drop one. You're using practically the same thing.
Let me, we've got sticky nodes now. Let me bring this down here so everybody can see. So in my augment, I'm going to bring it in double here. So I'm going to bring the account ID twice.
Mm-hmm.
And so now when I go to slice, let's say you didn't do that for whatever reason. Now you have two account IDs because you have the ID for the account here. And then you have ops.
Account ID. Yep.
I'm like, well, I don't really want to see this one.
So you drop it. Or in some cases, we use keep when you have 20 rows of 20 columns of data, but only 5 of them are important. Instead of dropping the other 15, keep the 5.
So this only lets you do one slice at a time. It's not like the expression.
No, you can do multiple slices at a time.
I can do multiple slices. So
yeah, you can drop as many fields as you want.
Wonderful. So I could go in here and take all of them out. So I don't have to node after node. That was something that was hard for me at first to learn, was that I made a filter for made a for everything I was slicing instead of just putting all the fields in here. But that's, being new. So we're going to slice account ID from ops. And you could even say, like, if you wanted to, you could say drop account from ops.
Correct. So the other reason it's extremely useful to have a slice is when you want to hide fields. So you as an admin need access to say all the fields, but someone else, some other team does not need to see all those fields, and there might be sensitive data to those, time sensitive data like gender and race and all those things. You don't want everyone to see those things, right?
Or a social security number.
Correct, social security number, those kind of things which are very sensitive. Those things, what we do is you can create a second data set from slicing it. So you remove all the highly critical fields that are sensitive for different reasons, and you just drop those fields and create a second data set, and whoever wants to build data sets out of that or dashboards, you let them do that. While when you are doing for people who need the access to the sensitive data, use the data set that has not been sliced.
Yeah, and you could, for those of you who understand registers or how to make your data set, you could make a register here before we dropped it and another register here.
Correct.
And have a data set with the field and another data set without the field. So that's once again the beauty of this.
Oh, just don't name them the same because they're going to overwrite.
No. Don't name anything the same. This would actually be a good one. Are we doing update?
Let's go to compute relative before we do an update.
Okay, cool. Now that we have some ideas, we can do some updates. Okay, so this was probably the last one that I ever used. And oh, by the way, I have to drop at 4:15, which is like in 25 minutes, just because of life. So we're gonna keep powering through this. Compute relative, the name scared me the first time. And then when I saw what it was asking me, it scared me more. What does compute relative actually mean? Like, and we have kind of our funny layman terms about it, but like what on like a data science level does compute relative mean?
Compute relative literally means what you're seeing on the screen. I want to group my data or partition my data by a particular field, then I want to order it either by that field or some other field in a particular direction, and then I want to add it as another column. So think of it as you have 3 rows or 3 columns of data, and you want to say, I want to order it by the created date of the opportunity, and then I want to see what is the value of each of those opportunities. So it's basically if when you are finding so what is the difference between how much opportunity we got yesterday and versus how much opportunity we got today for a particular account? The easiest way to do that is, instead of doing a giant row by row row by row difference, a column by column difference. So what this is going to do is create a column by column, column by column field for you. One which will be the previous created date, and one which will be the current created date, and then you can easily do the difference between the two.
So should we do like we want all ops by ID and then order by created date?
Let's do all ops by account ID or account name.
Okay, that's even better. And I have to tell you all that Sayantani helped me a ton learning. This is something you might have to lean on your peers to use compute relatives. I also have some mentors on the EA team that helped me learn this node and what it could do, because you don't really understand what it can do until you manipulate your own data with it. And then you're like, this is like the best. It's almost as good as the compute expression. So I just right now use the, oh wait, we were using the name.
Name, ID, anything.
Okay, so we're gonna use the account ID. So this is all accounts.
Ideally, always use ID because you can have same names multiple times.
Exactly, and that never happens, right? And so we want to take all of our accounts by ID, and then we want to see the created date in order of the opportunities with them, which we've already joined. So to do created date, guess what? Guess what?
We don't have created date.
There's a method to my madness here, because I want to show you all. This is how it goes while you're building it. You're going to say, like, I didn't think I needed that field.
And then you go back and you need it. So Anna is asking, is it like selecting a new key to find data and or organize data? It's not a new key. It's basically we are organizing the data for better visibility of what is going on.
Exactly. So then, oh, look what I did. I didn't go back to my augment and let it through the augment, did I?
Didn't you do propagate?
Yeah, but you know, there's no a second round doesn't ever hurt. Okay, there we go. And then we want to order by ops.
So while Jen is doing this, Krishna is asking, is there any way to use these features to adjust the format of the create date using Dataflow? We see the date and time second. What do you want, Krishna? Do you want only to see the date?
Yeah, we just want to see the date like 2020 06 30
yes.
instead
yes.
of 0801, the whole
totally.
thing.
Use a compute expression. Jen, can you really create one really quick?
Let me make sure I have a date in here that we can work with.
No, actually, yeah, you don't have this computer expression there. Okay, yes. You have the created date.
Created date, great.
So you just add a new field. And
we'll call it created date too. You can name it whatever you want. And I always try and do my names and my labels the same so that
yeah, me too.
And this one doesn't allow you to do spaces.
Correct.
So you can use underscores or no spaces. It's easy.
So and then it will be a date, and then the SQL expression will be to date. Then created date underscore sec underscore epoch. So this is something we learned from H. You're missing.
Oh.
Epoch. Yeah.
Epic.
And so epoch. So we learned this from Pete Lyons, just because the number of times you have dates, always try using epochs in these things, because it makes your life very, very simple.
And that's a whole nother meeting we could have just on that.
Yeah, epochs have their own quirks. So the date format can be whatever you want. Einstein Analytics takes what is ISO certified, which is year. So Y dash month, and with capital M's, and then dash small d's, two small d's. That's what is standardized by ISO, and that's why everywhere in Einstein Analytics you see this format.
Okay, so we're going to pretend this isn't fiscal. So
yeah, sure.
Yeah, and this is something I had to ask a lot when I was new. It's about date formatting, because that's, all of you who build with dashboards know it doesn't come out usually in the format the users want. So you will have to probably a lot of dates when you're first building. And that's something, there's a couple of references that we can actually share on, but it's part of your cookbook. Now, if you had a fiscal year that's different than a typical year end, you could actually add that information here, but we're not going to go into that today.
Yeah.
And then we would save it. And now we would just, I mean, you can rename this in the lens to whatever you want to name that field, right? But
yes.
Just be create a date too. I hope that was helpful to you. I remember when I learned that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, no problem. Okay, I'm going to save it. So you can always go back in here and add more fields as you're working with the data, which is really cool.
Anytime they want more fields, or you understand that doing it in the data flow is far easier than figuring out how to do it in the dashboard, feel free to use it.
Right. And are we just going to stop here? Or are we just like what happened? Like the first time I used a compute relative, I was like, okay, I know I want to separate it by ID, and I know I want to order create a date by the first one that happened, which is ascending, right? Now what do we do?
Now we add a field.
So this isn't actually creating anything for you yet. It's just ordering it.
It's just ordering. Now we are going to add a field.
Well, what if I wanted to see the first one? Like I just want the first opportunity ever created on the account. What would I do?
Go to the dashboard and look at it, because you cannot look at it here, right?
Yeah, so don't get overly excited about, I mean, you can do things with this, but it's not going to magically do everything for you in order for data. Okay, what should we make with this one?
Does opportunity have amount?
Well, we can add amount if it doesn't have it. I think it does, though. Let's see.
Okay. Just go to the output fields.
No, I didn't. I don't think I have amount on here at all.
Okay.
No. Because I just created it today, and I didn't know what I wanted when we started this.
That's fine.
Because this is how real life goes when you're playing with it, right? So, all right. So now we're going to add a field for amount.
We did ascending, right? So let's call this next amount. So you don't need to add a description. If you add, it's great, but not necessary. Then the source field will be amount. You can use SQL, which we are not going to go into. We already showed you how SQL works in computer expressions. It's very similar to do it, but yeah, we are just going to use the source field.
And when it says source field, it just means the fields we already chose on the page.
Correct. So now we are going to use the source field as amount. Yeah. And then we are going to say offset, not by current, but by next, because we are taking the next value, and there is no default value. We are just going to leave it empty and save again.
Ooh.
The other thing is, if you have different objects, and one object has your created date and the other has when it was won, then you can use this to figure out what is the difference between the two times.
Yeah, and our easy way of explaining this, when you order data, like Sayantani and I both have like some interesting ways of describing it to people, but I like her one about like if you had a neighborhood full of houses and you needed to order by the addresses, or you need to order by the color, you could use this to kind of change what you've built around and then pull what you need. Because like, I just want to see this out of the ones that are red, right? Or anything that starts with a number 1. And don't beat yourself up over like the first, last, next, and what does it mean. As you play with the data, you'll learn that as you have a use case for it. But there's no place you can go outside of what we're doing here that's going to say, this is a compute relative and this is what you should do with it, right? Unique to every person.
Yeah, you can also actually, when you transpose columns to rows, you can use compute relative because it lets you transpose your columns and rows.
Yes, exactly. What do we have left on here?
What do we have left? We have the update and then register. We have, okay, so there are a few others we have dim to measure, which is a dimension to measure. We are not going to use it right now because technically it's a very old thing that still remains. It's the same thing that you do in a computer expression when you call number to string. It's the exact
Let's call
same
this a tape measure.
or string to number. Yeah.
Yeah.
Either way.
We used to use it, like, for example, if you wanted to like group on a number instead of calculate on a number,
Correct.
like come through as a text.
Or correct, or the number came in as a text and you want to, like age of building, it came in as a text, you want to convert it into a number. So that is what it does. Flatten, this will take a whole new hour, so let's ignore it. It's for hierarchies, roles, those kind of things. So let's ignore that. Flatten for now.
Yeah, you'll learn this if you're using like territory management. Really, yeah, we're gonna skip that. And the little Einstein head, we're gonna skip him for now. But this is where, like Catherine talks about, like putting predictions in here and AI, which you have to learn the basics before you can even start playing with the AI. So that's another session. So let's go to the update because it's so easy. So I'm gonna call this update. And just for the sake of it, let's do like the account ID. I would use the account ID on opportunities, but we sliced it off. So, and our CR that we just built, and I have little acronyms that I use for these rather than saying compute relative, but I'm just calling it by like the first letters of what it does. CE.
Yeah, even I do the same thing. It's first letters, first three letters, whatever is the convention.
So what this is asking you, it's a little bit like an augment, right? It's saying, okay, what's on the left side and what are we pulling? So it's still the same data set. It's still accounts and opportunities, but we want the key to be the account ID because that's the same ID. My search is not working again. So we're going to use the account ID. And then on the right source, we're going to, you know, I love this because you can pull in external, well, there's all kinds of things you can do later on with it. Which one should we use? Should we use, I was going to use the account ID to do this, or should we pull in a, you know what, let's pull in another ID. I'm going to go ahead and create this. Really going to put it all the way out there? Sorry, I talk to the interface sometimes. I'm a little nerdy like that. Let's go to accounts and then let's see what other IDs that we have that we can update. Oh, we have the owner ID. That would be a good one. And we can pull in, and we'll have to pull in the users too. Okay, I'm just gonna do it. I've got like 15 minutes. Okay, so I'm gonna pull in the user table because I don't want the owner ID to be the ID. I want it to be their name. So I'm gonna say extract users. It's working here. Just don't even get me started, right? And let's do the
ID and the name.
And the name. I do this actually quite a lot in my regular org. We're always having to pull the names of users for all kinds of things. And you can do username, you can do last name, you can do all kinds of fun stuff. Okay, so we've got this, it's sitting down here, it's just all by itself. Get everybody colored. All right, so we're going to take that off and we're gonna do, this one's doing it again too. The user ID. Oh my gosh, where did it go? This is real life. Or let's do created by ID instead. So whoever created this account, we don't want their
IDs, we want their names.
And so the right source, we're going to pull our users. And we're going to dip in with the same thing with the, we did the created by ID, which would be the user ID. And then we're going to go into the users and pull this ID. And then it's going to say, well, okay, now that I dipped into users, what field do I want to pull? And I'm going to say for the left field that is the created by ID, I wish I had all this in a great big document to give everybody on this call.
And the right field will be name.
Yeah, it only exists where we're telling you. So instead of now it's seeing the ID, we now have the name. You could technically have done an augment to do this, but sometimes we only need one field and we don't need to go through all that trouble.
Correct. And update is faster than doing an augment.
Boom. And so we have a lot of related lists in my org. And so we're constantly, there we go. We are constantly updating the IDs, because if you pull any related list objects, they have IDs all over the place, everything they relate to, but they don't actually have the names when you pull them into EA. So don't be surprised when you're working with this, when you're like, in Salesforce, it looks like it has the name, but in here it has the ID, because you can always just update that ID with the name. Ooh, what should we do now? We got this. And I'm so sorry that I have like 15 minutes left here, because we could do this all night. I love data flows, but should we go ahead and register it?
Yes, let's register this. So when we register it, this is what happens. This is where you add the security predicate. You cannot do a security predicate without doing a register. And why do you need security predicate? The very reason is you need to secure your data. You don't want everyone to see everything. So that's why we use security predicates, and security predicates can be CSV files. It can come in directly from Salesforce. It can be your own methodology of security predicate based on the organization. So it can be anything and everything.
Yeah, so for now, we're going to skip like the sharing and the security. Most of the time, if you're just making it, putting it in like your private folder, it doesn't really matter anyways, because it's sit in the folder and nobody can access it except.
Yeah, but when you are doing it for everyone, then you need to have a security predicate.
Oh, we have security predicates like you wouldn't believe in my org. And that was something I had to learn that seemed really scary at first. And then you find out it's really awesome.
And the other part of using a security predicate is, so in Salesforce, in standard Salesforce, what you can do is you can have security on your rows and your fields. In Einstein Analytics, you cannot have the security on your fields. And hence, when we spoke about slice, we said, how do you hide the sensitive data is by dropping those columns. So the reason we do that is just because of that, because one, it is sensitive data and we cannot have a
this is me. I'm just checking to make sure I have data in there if I run this.
You cannot actually have you cannot have a field level security on Einstein Analytics data sets. So that's why
this is a bug up here, by the way, guys. I didn't
yeah, when you use ampersand, this happens.
This is not that I typed that in that many times, but it's kind of funny. I can see it keeps going bigger and bigger and bigger. So you have your register, you definitely, I make a habit of naming the alias and the name the same, because the API name is super important. You don't want to change anything, then you'll create a new data. Like you could actually write over your data set if you start trying to change everything afterwards, or you can make like 10 new data sets and not know which one is the right one. So always keep these two consistent so you can refer to them later. And this is the name that's going to show up in Analytics Studio when you go to work with the data set.
Right. The alias and the name are basically the label name and the API name that shows up in your dashboards. So if you keep them the same and you need to change it on a later date, it will be super easy for you to change it.
So in the new release coming up in a couple of weeks here, you get a data flow versioning, which I've used in Sandbox, and it's wonderful. And so if you want to roll it back to what you built before you added something or vice versa, you can go, you can make several versions of it. Right now, we only have one version. So let's hope it works. So we saved it, we run it, it's running. I'm not sure, like I said, this is a dev org, so we're going to see what we've got to work with on there. If we have closed won opportunities, it should go, like it should run fine. But this is kind of your do or die. Like Sayantani and I sit up, I call it being the data flow watchtower. So we're our data flows at our company. So I'll find myself, I schedule a notification here, when this data flow runs to let me know. And even after hours, because I'm pretty much like a 24/7 employee. My job is to make sure all the data flows run, all day long. And if something goes wrong, then I troubleshoot and fix it, even if it's at 2 a.m. because that's what I get paid to do. So, but you could have way worse jobs, so I'm okay with that. So depending on how much data, see. Yeah, it's probably not going to work in, oh, not present in the right source. This is everybody's life, right? So this is because we're in DevOrg. It's not probably going to work correctly. But you would find your data. I have another data flow in here just to show you. So if we have like accounts with opportunities, and we're going to run it now. This is a beautiful part about working with DevOrg, because you don't have like all the data that you need in it. Excuse me.
Yeah, that is one problem that you face. Also, at times when you're working with the DevOrgs or sandboxes, you might not have the full data. And what happens is, what happens in those cases is you might think that what I did would work, and then you find that it's not working. It's just because of the sheer amount of data that is present in the data set. If you don't have everything, it might not just work.
Okay, so I'm running this data flow, which is one that I made before for another presentation that we did. It has some of the same types of nodes that we created. And I ran it, and now we're gonna see, like once you run it, where do you, now that I ran it, what happened? Oh, okay, this isn't too bad. It didn't fail, but it just let me know that it didn't find any records that matched.
Correct.
Yes, we did, but we still have the data that it did find. So if I was to go into accounts with opportunities and see what I named my data set, which is accounts with ops, and then I go into Analytics Studio.
So once your data set runs, you need to refresh your Analytics Studio.
And there we have it. So you find your fields here. This is everything I created. Let's pretend that's what we just created right now. But everything is here. And then if you want to rename your fields, this is where you rename your fields with a little pencil if you don't want API names. But everything you create over in that data manager is actually what shows up here. And you can filter it too if you just want data sets that have accounts, for example. Because maybe you forgot what you named it, right? Because we don't ever forget anything. And there's everything that, here's all your data sets that have accounts. And then the details, this is why API names, you know, like when you're doing a name and a label is so important, is because if you go to the properties, see the API name and then see the data set name. If you rename this, it's not going to rename the API name. So you want to be real careful about consistently naming. I like them to match. That way everything goes together the same, and I'm not looking for, you know, if I need to reference the API name, I know it's the same name as the data set. But that's my preference. You don't have to necessarily do it that way. All right, I've got like 5 minutes. Anybody have any questions that we could answer quickly? And I apologize, sorry, you can see my Twitter here. I'm going back to my data manager. Okay, there we go. All right, this is what we built. I've now saved this, so we have this for future meetings. If we want to have another meeting and come back and talk about what we did, it's here. If anybody wants a copy of anything, but as you can see, the JSON, which we were talking about in the beginning, is now super long compared to what we had to start with. So we had only like a couple of them. So this is the packaging that is telling what to do with the data.
And you can download it. You can fix something and re-upload it, those kind of things.
Yeah, it's always a good idea before you start editing a data flow and after you're done to just download this JSON. Even if you don't know JSON, you don't know how to work with it. If you messed it up, if you accidentally deleted nodes you didn't mean to, if you have a backup here, you just load it in this upload JSON and fix it. And that saved me many, many times.
Yes, and from July 18th, when summer releases, you don't have to save it just because you're doing this, because there will be versioning, which will save you from downloading and keeping multiple copies of your data flow in your computer.
Exactly.
Or cloud, whatever you are using.
Sayantani, do you want me to give you access to this if you want to stay and answer some questions?
Let's ask people. Any questions? Or we are about to end because Jen is about to drop off.
Everybody's, do we overload your brain?
Yeah, I think my brain's full.
Okay, good to know.
And we can have another meeting that's, any of these OneNodes, right? Any OneNode could be its own 1 hour discussion, right?
Correct, correct.
No problem with that.
Anyone else have questions?
I'm sure everybody needs a drink break and a bathroom break.
How do you get different colors? Once I post this into the Einstein Analytics YouTube channel, all the links that we spoke about, we are going to post all of them there. Okay, any other questions?
Can we get the link to the Einstein Analytics YouTube channel? Name
Yes,
of the Einstein Analytics YouTube channel?
It's called Einstein Analytics, literally.
I think it was the link that I posted.
Was it the one from you or is it by Salesforce?
No, this is from us.
Oh, okay.
So it's literally called Einstein Analytics. If you have ever looked at London Data Tribe's last presentation, you will see it there. Also, to add, before we end the meeting, London Data Tribe's 2nd anniversary is this Wednesday, I think Wednesday or Thursday. Let me check. It's on Thursday.
Yeah. Oh my gosh,
it's on Thursday, 2nd July. Please, please, please attend it because I think they are doing a competition with 4 people and you get to learn a lot when you see other people's dashboards and creations. So it will be awesome. And then, of course, on first week of August, there will be the Chicago Data Tribe's 1st anniversary, which we will see what we are going to do. If anyone has ideas, feel free to ping me, post on the community, post anywhere, and we will take it up. Any other questions?
It's a very helpful, very, very helpful session. So learned a lot. Thank you.
Thanks, Krishna. Questions? No questions. Anyone wants to say something?
Jennifer, thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
This is great.
Awesome. Great good that you guys joined and heard the 2 of us talk and jibber jabber a lot. Okay, so we will end this meeting and we will see you in August again. Bye, guys.
Thanks, Sayantani.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Take care.
Jen.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.